Welcome back. You're listening to The Voice of Russia with me, Scott Craig. Over the weekend, tens of thousands of protesters gathered at rival demonstrations in Moscow. Despite minus 20-degree weather, up to 120,000 people, or 23,000 depending on if you believe the organizers or the police, showed up at an anti-government protest organized by the For Fair Elections campaign. Supporters of the government and of Mr. Putin held their own demonstration, which also drew tens of thousands, though those figures too were disputed. What we can objectively say is that both protests were large and that they underline the political faults running through contemporary Russia. But where do these protests go from here, and what impact are they having on Russian society and on the presidential election campaign itself? To discuss this, I'm joined here in the studio by Nicu Popescu. He's from the European Council of Foreign Relations. And I'm joined on the line from Moscow by Alyona Arshinina, who's co-chair of the Young Guard of the United Russia Party. Alyona Arshinina, let me begin with you. Looking at these protest numbers, the police say there were 138,000 people at the pro-Putin rally. They say there were 35 to 36,000 people at the anti-government rally. The most independent observers seem to think that they were both roughly equal in size. What do you make of these numbers?
I can tell you my personal point of view that things which had been happening since the 4th of December, I mean different oppositional protests and something, and so-called the Orange Revolution or something, these things mobilized the co-thinkers of Mr. Putin, and that's why we saw the big quantity of people on Poklonne to support Vladimir Putin and to say no to Orange Revolution.
There were reports that not all of the people attending the pro-Putin rally were there of their own will. For example, there were reports that factory workers, that public workers, teachers, etc. were told that they had to attend the rally or they would be fired. What's your response to that?
Oh, no, I didn't hear something about that fact, but of course, if that fact, for example, that thing really was on Saturday, I don't think that it will make a big plus to Mr. Putin, and I think that 100% the organizers and the candidate itself understands that it would be better to act without different administrative actions and things. Different people, and I saw it in different social networks, and I mean Russian social networks, for example, ВКонтакте, or in Russian Twitter, or in Russian Facebook, and something else. I saw that there were lots of different real people who really went there to explain its position and by its will, not because they were asked for or something.
We should also make it clear that there were allegations that some people attending the anti-government rally were also paid as well, so that these allegations have been on both sides. Nicu Popescu, let me come to you. I mean, looking at the number, firstly, the police say there were 138,000 people at the pro-Putin rally. They say there were 35 to 36,000 at the anti-government rally. Though, as I said to Alyona, most independent observers seem to think they were both sort of roughly equal. What's your take on what we're looking at?
I haven't been there, of course, but just by listening very carefully to what both sides say, and I don't mean the police, but independent observers, but also participants, it seems to me that there's some kind of consensus that the rallies were roughly equal, and probably roughly around 100,000 people. You can also relatively easily compare photographs from Bolotnaya back in December and Bolotnaya now, and the number of people again is roughly the same, and it's comparable to what was on Poklonnaya Gora, the pro-Putin rally. But besides moving beyond this discussion on exact numbers, which are always hard to judge in such large demonstrations, I think the most important thing that these are the biggest rallies in Russia for more than 20 years. And this is a tremendous factor in Russian domestic politics. That's a new factor, which is probably there to stay. It could get even more, there could be even more mass mobilization after the elections, depending on how they go. But the other thing to note is that all these parallels with Kyrgyzstan, Ukraine, Orange Revolution are completely misjudged. I haven't heard any person on the anti-Putin rallies talking of the desire of a revolution. So in a sense, framing it as a kind of the threat of an orange revolution in Russia, I think is just trying to invent an easy enemy that doesn't exist, and trying to fight an easy enemy that doesn't exist. It's a bit like Don Quixote fighting windmills. The truth is that these people are partly protesting against Putin, but partly they realize that Putin will stay in power for the foreseeable future, but they want to push him and nudge him toward greater opening, greater liberalization, without going for any kind of revolutionary upheaval.
Alyona, Arshinina, the Putin camp, and you're from United Russia, keep talking about Orange Revolution. In fact, you mentioned it yourself. Why are the pro-government, pro-Putin demonstrators talking about Orange Revolution so much? Do they really believe there is a danger that there could be an orange-style revolution in Russia?
Very interesting phenomenon, Orange Revolution. That's why I mentioned the so-called. So, of course, people saw and they sometimes some of Russians visited Ukraine, maybe Kiev, in times of Orange Revolution, and they saw that people were like crazy. And for example, some of politicians, for example, in Ukraine, they used the opposition mood in society, and they just like on a wave came to power, and that's why people here see the traits of like this Orange Revolution. There is an opposition who sometimes come to the new American ambassador, and they discuss something, and the doors are closed, so nobody knows here in Russia what's happened there besides the doors of American embassy. So that's why, for example, people see here a very aggressive opposition who try to frighten usual people with the different words like for example, Putin will be imprisoned, or today for example, tomorrow we will live in a new life. It's like a very revolutionary statements, and that's why people here they saw, for example, what Mr. Putin did for this country. He gathered regions into the common state. It's Russian Federation. He made a lot of different useful things, and the budget of Russia grew maybe 15 times, and of course there are a lot of different things I can say more, but it's only a mood of people. So the people, usual people, call it Orange Revolution or the so-called Orange Revolution. Nobody, I think, consider it like 100% Orange Revolution. For example, we can. It came to my mind. For example, twice Mr. John McCain, the senator, American senator, wrote in Twitter to Mr. Putin like, Vlad, Arab Spring is coming to you or something like that. It's not delicate and it's not diplomatic, and I really don't know how to call it. And of course, people consider it like one of traits of like Orange Revolution or something. And for example, Hillary Clinton, the State Secretary of United States, before she read the reports of international observers, she told all over the world to journalists and to different politicians that in Russia elections, she didn't recognize elections in Russia as democratic elections and open to all over the world. So, of course, these like interference into Russian policy considered here like traits of Orange Revolution.
Just a reminder, you're listening to The Voice of Russia with me, Scott Craig. And today I'm discussing the weekend's protests in Russia with my guests, Nicu Popescu and Alyona Arshinina. Nicu Popescu, I mean, what's your take on that? I mean, Alyona Arshinina is talking there about essentially a US orchestrated Orange campaign in Russia.
Well, I think Alyona herself mentioned that politicians in Ukraine during the Orange Revolution came to power on a wave of popular support and frustration with President Kuchma. What happened after that was, of course, that Tymoshenko and Yushchenko, the presidents who came to power after the Orange Revolution, mismanaged the situation. And in an open and democratic political systems, both Tymoshenko and Yushchenko lost elections, Yanukovych came to power, and now we have what we have. So, the Orange Revolution was a normal political process. Some politicians came to power on the wave of it, mismanaged the situation, and were sent back into opposition. There's nothing wrong. This is how politics works. On these accusations on the United States being involved, I think the easiest for most centralized governments in the world is always to find external enemies. Rather than trying to tackle the dissatisfaction that they have in their own countries, you always have inventions that, it's foreign enemies encircling us. The United States is very often invoked as an external enemy, but Russia, among some of Russia's neighbors, is also invoked often as an external enemy. I wouldn't go, to be frank, into the details of what Russian or American parliamentarians write on Twitter or tell each other, because we know very well that lots of Russian politicians, especially in the parliament, can be extremely rude about other countries, and we can say plenty of names, but we also know that Vladimir Putin has been on a number of instances very, very sincere, outspoken, and sometimes rude. So I don't think that the fact that John McCain wrote something on Twitter is any indicator of America supporting this, just like Putin's speech in Munich, which was extremely anti-Western, doesn't mean that Putin is supporting Obama or McCain or Sarkozy or David Cameron. There's also useful just to look at what Putin says. After yesterday's protest on Poklonnaya Gora, Putin himself recognized that some administrative resources might have been used to bring people onto the street. And administrative resources means the use of state institutions for some political purposes. So I think the situation here is complex. Trying to divert the attention and put the blame on the global bogeyman, the United States, is not how Vladimir Putin is going to solve his political problem. Precisely, this problem relies from the fact that people are tired. He makes a lot of promises now. Today an article on democracy, last week an article on economic growth and liberalization. But the biggest question Russian citizens have is, why is corruption worsening? Why didn't Putin manage to do these things in the last 12 years? This is a very long period of time. So if Putin didn't solve some of his problems, if he didn't manage to fight corruption during 12 years, if he didn't manage to liberalize the economy and push for growth, then maybe he wasn't very successful in these 12 years.
Alyona, Arshinina, that's a good point, isn't it? That actually Putin seems to have become remarkably active in the last couple of months. He seems to have prescriptions for everything from tackling corruption to improving inter-ethnic relations in Russia. Why do you think he's really coming forward with these plans now? Isn't it that the protests are really having quite an impact on him?
You mentioned that Mr. Putin had enough time to win the corruption